In this video, I'm going to describe how to measure a pair of trousers from costume stock to see if it'll fit on your client. The first thing we want to look at is the waist. This belongs to the suit coat that I measured in a previous video, so I know that they go together, and of course they're stored together. But as we know, in costuming, we take in the waist and let it out all the time, so it may or may not be on its original line. There are a couple ways to measure. It's tempting to lay it out flat and measure from the outside fold at the side seam to the other outside fold on the other side seam. That gives us 19.5, which is a 39-inch waist, you think. However, we need to take geometry into account. Geometry is where, this piece of geometry at least, is where the circumference of the trousers is an outside circle, and the torso, the circumference, is the inside circle. And so we need to make sure that there's some ease in here if this is going to fit the actor. Another way of measuring is to take your yardstick and put it on the inside of the circle and measure over to the other inside of the circle, which in this case brings us to 18.75. So that's a difference of about 1.5 inches total in those two measurements. So be careful about how you measure, whether it's on the outside or the inside. So when you're looking in costume stock and you're considering a suit, you want to look at center back to see if there's any seam allowance to let out if you need it. This has about 1/4 inch seam allowance, and this is where costume forensics comes in, CSI Costume Shop. I can see here that there are old stitching lines, so that tells me, and I can see this dark thread here, that tells me that this belt loop was taken off, this was let out, and the belt loop put back on. It's also fun because this says, it's printed right here, 36, and that tells me that the manufacturer intended this to be a 36-inch waist. Now, knowing that the manufacturer intended this to be a 36-inch waist aligns perfectly with the manufacturer's label in the suit coat that I showed you in a previous video of the 42 regular, because the waist of the trousers is typically 6 inches smaller than the chest of the coat. That difference is called the drop. In classic menswear, American style, the boxy cut, that drop, the difference in measuring from the chest of the coat to the waist of the trousers, is about 6 inches. There are also athletic or European cuts that are slimmer in the waist, and the drop on that sort of coat can be 7 to 8 inches. Once we've ascertained that the waist will fit the actor, whether or not we need to let it out, there's enough here, then we need to check the pants length, and we check that by measuring the inseam. From the fork, this area where the front crotch seam and the back crotch seam come together and then intersect with the two inseams, this area is called the fork. So we want to measure from the fork down to the hem to see if these trousers are long enough for the inseam of our actor. So here I'm measuring from the fork down to the hem. Now I need to leave at least 1/4 inch for seam allowance if I'm going to face that and turn it. So these trousers could be as long as 33 inches. That's a little, that would give us 1/8 inch seam allowance. So I'm going to say 32 3/4 is the longest that this hem could go. Another measurement you need to take into account is the circumference of the ankle or the hem of the trousers. Some periods have a narrower, more pegged leg look, and others are much wider. So you need to make sure that the trousers themselves throughout the leg are as wide as the period that you're interested in representing, as wide as that is. The final measurement you need to take into consideration is the rise, and that is the measurement from the fork up to the top of the waistband. Some trousers from some periods, say the 40s, are quite 30s and 40s, are quite high-waisted. Some trouser cuts, say the 70s, are very low-waisted, and that's something that really isn't alterable. We need to make sure that the rise makes the waistband hit on the actor at the place that conveys the period that you're trying to represent.